Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to this webinar organized by TechnologyCatalogue.com. Today, my name is Eric Nijveld, Managing Partner at TechnologyCatalogue.com, and today I have the pleasure to introduce Steinar Wasa Tverlid, who will talk about radical innovation. So, Steinar, over to you.
Thank you very much. I will share my screen, and then I'll move my presentation so that you guys can see a front page. And then I can continue. So today we're going to talk about radical innovation. My name is Steinar Wasa Tverlid. I'm an innovation specialist in Equinor. And then first, super short about Equinor. From an innovation point of view, this slide sums the company up pretty well. On the right-hand side here, we have a big installation. We have for decades been pushing installations, pushing borders. This one is the largest of its kind. It's a floating spar platform. But this is where we're coming from. So we're now more going towards what we see in the middle here, which is a very equivalent installation to the other one, just that it's unmanned. Equivalent in the sense of productivity and production. So this one doesn't even have a toilet, and this one is under work. And then, of course, on the left side, we have our green energy production. It's a floating offshore windmill. We're the biggest producer and operator of floating offshore wind. But I'm not here to talk about Equinor. I'm here to talk about innovation. And I like to start with this one. So, in times of change, looking in the rearview mirror may not give the best perspective on what's coming. And I think it's amazing to see how often companies actually look behind themselves and see what they did in the year before to decide what to continue with, or look to the sides to see what the competitors are doing, not really looking forward. And when everything is going the same way, that is a possibility. But when things are turning, it's very difficult. Like we have now, we had a huge drop in the oil prices. We have a climate issue coming towards us, and we're deep in it. And not to mention the COVID-19, which all of them are things that are coming to us, and we need to look at things differently. We need to critical to the ways we're doing things. So my talk today is going to be about how to make radical innovation as systematically as we do incremental innovation. Radical innovation, I'll come back to what that really means. But it's about being systematic also on the way you can look at what you do and come up with alternatives to that. So an outline quickly, I'm going to talk about radical innovation in 5 steps: what to innovate, who innovates, which direction to take, how to generate radical concepts, and if I get the time, how to implement radical concepts, which basically to many is the biggest issue. And all of this has been summed up in this book. I've had a lot of good feedback on what I've been speaking about the last few years. So I actually put that down in a book. I'll come back to that as well. So then first to what? And then let's start with a definition of innovation, radical and incremental innovation. And here we have a light bulb. And on this side, we have a different one, a different design, maybe a different gas, even a different socket perhaps. Then we have a current knowledge, and we build on top of that knowledge. So to make this one, we need knowledge from this. Then we refer to this as incremental. And then it's no shock to anyone, I guess, that over here comes a LED lamp. And to make this one light up, you need totally different knowledge than with this lamp here, the classic light bulb. So we are replacing it. We're making the knowledge that we have to make this obsolete, and we're installing new knowledge. That's what we talk about radical innovation. There are many definitions between radical and incremental innovation around. I think this is a very useful one that is easy to remember and very easy to sort of use in everyday life as you go. And then to take that further and to sort of underline why this is so complicated and why very many companies end up only with incremental innovation, I need to bring out the S-curves. I love these curves, and this is important. So here we have on this axis here, we have measure of effort, or you can also look at this as time if you like. And up here we have advancement. So now if you kick off a new technology, this can even be an industry, but let's say technology here, you have to work a bit to sort of get the market to see the potential. And when the market sees the potential, you sell and you earn something, you can invest and you improve things, and things are looking very good, and things advance. But you come to a point where there is a maturity. The maturity area, which is characterized by the fact that you need a lot of effort or time to get a slight improvement. I can imagine that a petrol engine, a modern petrol engine, is in that part now. You need a lot of effort to make it a little bit better. So, for example, consuming less petrol. So what do we do? In the world, we like advancement. So how can we advance from here? Well, we need a new technology, a new, radically different technology. And then this, as a sort of a law of nature, this always starts below the one that you have been optimizing for a long time. And that space between here is what I call the interesting space, maybe a silly expression, but anyway, it is interesting in the sense that we really need to understand and handle this to be able to progress. So let me come with an example that I very often use. So here we have horse and tractor. So the horse were sort of the power out in the fields for us in good old days. It helps us everywhere. And there are certainly many things you can do to improve the horse. So we started to get them domesticated, and then we started to give them the food and maybe better food and rest at the right times and a good stable and so on. But then, of course, there is a limit for how much you can get out of a horse. And then came the tractors. And I dug out this nice picture of a tractor. This one is made in 1902, if I'm not all wrong, which actually is not the first point. It is tiny gap from the start here to here. It is almost 50 years, because in the 1850s, things started to look a little bit like tractors. So this is actually not the first, but it's really still quite early. And I guess everybody can see that this one here struggles to compete with the horse on most things that it can do. I mean, you can just look at the one front wheel. If you look closely, it looks like it's made out of wood. Big cast iron thing, 6 horsepower is perhaps, I mean, out in the fields, this is challenging. And the horse can do this. And then comes, if you look here, the green tractor here, this one is probably more efficient than 100 horses. And here we are on a totally different level of that S-curve of the next horse. So you can, of the next tractor, sorry. So you can imagine if you're going up here and you're at this level here with your horses and everything you know, and all generations before you have been working with horses, and you have to choose between, you know, improving the food mix of your horse. Next neighboring farm has had tremendous results of this food mix, and you're considering that, and somebody comes along with a drawing of this, and it's really hopeless compared to what you know and everything you've done so far. And in addition, the whole thing around this tractor, like, you know, where to get diesel, spare parts, you know, service, is absent. So how can you be interested in this when you actually are up here and getting better things? Well, it's about being visionary. To be visionary and look forward and have this one in mind when you invest here. And then, of course, split up and not put all your money down here, but also some up here. Actually, most up here. But to me, this is really important to understand this interesting space when it comes to radical and incremental innovation. Because if you don't do anything special, everything is going to be up here and you will never advance to the next. But very often I get the question, why don't you just wait until here and then buy the tractor when it passes the horse? Well, we can do that in our company with furniture and buildings that we buy to use and so on for offices. But for our core business, we need to be early adopters. We believe in shaping the future of energy, and everybody who does believe in that needs to start with an early engagement here. So either first movers or at least early adopters or early followers, and not late followers. So this is really important to understand as we go on. We're going to speak about how to get the next S-curve in this presentation. Then who innovates? And then this is the first really important thing to remember between the difference between incremental and radical innovation. So here we have a kerosene lamp, and here we have some experts on kerosene lamps. And what would you guys say is the possibility of these guys actually being able to improve this kerosene lamp? I would say it's really high because they know everything about it. The more they are, the more likely you get a step ahead. Maybe the smaller the step gets, that's a bigger discussion. But they have a knowledge and they build further on that. What is the possibility of these kerosene lamp experts coming up with a light bulb? Where they have to take all their knowledge and ditch it and come up with something new. So I say, what if you show them a light bulb? This is a bit of a, how can I say, well, this is a joke, but my point here is to get the light bulb, we need multi-skill. So to get incremental innovation, you gather the experts. To get radical stuff, you need multi-skill team. Then you are better off by actually making your current knowledge obsolete. And this is an example of how we do this in our company. So I've been running a radical innovation group since 2011. I'm not going to go through all this in details, just a couple of interesting things. I borrow people from all around the organization for 2.5 hours a week. I don't, load them with work beyond that. We're not too many. I would say that creativity is inversely proportional to the number of people. So we are, these days we're 5. We're multi-skilled, and we invite people that we need either for problem understanding, go live, or specific issues that we need expertise on when we work on things. But we also make sure that for the psychological safety bit, we make sure that the newcomers don't outnumber the core group, so that we have that sort of psychological safety. People know each other, take off, and then our guests very soon jump on the wagon as well. So that's how we do things. I need to run here because I have lots to go through. I hope you can follow. Which direction to take? This is about leadership and a dilemma that very often people feel in big companies. We need to produce safely at the same time as we need to be innovative. How can we separate between these two? And to explain that, I have this image that I really love. It's these penguins have been probably walking here for centuries, millenniums probably, from where they eat to where they lay their eggs and back. And then they go on a run. This is alignment, traditional alignment leadership, explained here by the leader in front, everybody following this leader. And this is really important to do. I mean, in our oil sector, when we are out on our platforms, we cannot have people, being innovative and trying out new cool stuff as we're out in action, in operation. So if anybody goes out of the line, the leader will push, ask this person to, stop this, go back, or find something else to do, because we need to stay within the rules and regulations that we have. And this is important. But this part works seriously poorly for innovation, this kind of leadership. So then we have this gentleman here, and he is known to most of you, I guess. He says, a leader is like a shepherd. He stays behind the flock, letting the most nimble go out ahead, whereupon the others follow, not realizing that all along they're being directed from behind. And in innovation terms, in schematic terms, this means that the leader, which I'm now placed outside, the leader can be inside here too, but the leader puts up a frame. This is how leaders can direct innovation. They put up the frame, but they let people freely search within that frame. If anybody goes out of that frame, this person would go over and say, well, that's cool that you have these ideas over here, but today we are working on this subject, so please go back in. That's about limiting the free search, but to be more directed. That's really important. And as we're in this illustration here, I'd also like to mention that, the failing bits, that is completely different to what we saw with alignment leadership, where Failing is not allowed at all. Here, I look upon this as drawing the map within this frame, because we haven't been here before, so we need to innovate and we need to draw the map. And if this person down here, reports back and says, this corner down here is really hopeless, nobody gets angry as we would in the opposite leadership style. We would say that is absolutely fantastic. Draw that into the map, inform the others, and continue searching somewhere else. So we're actually as interested in places that doesn't the area that doesn't work as we are in what works. So I hope you can see how this is really different from the previous one. Now I'll very briefly come back to one. We use one and the other, but just to show these penguins once more. Here, these guys are searching for fish, and you don't see any line anymore. So here is frame search, and you can be sure that if one of them finds some fish, all the others would follow. So that's completely different. But here, just a few words on when to use the alignment bit and when to use the frame search. And I'd like to mention here, the thing is, before I dive into that, leaders cannot say that I'm pro on one of them. I'm really good at alignment, so I'll stay there. And somebody else says, well, I'm really good at frame leadership, I will spend my time over here. That is really not possible, because then you won't get anything implemented, and you won't have your development team to really understand what to develop. So I made this nice drawing here of somebody walking in nature. It's a map here. These are the mountains. On the line here, we've been come as far as this, and we're going the dashed line. So we have the map. We know where to go. Then it's alignment. This is typically an operational environment. Then, but very often we're in this position here. We've been walking so far. We don't have the map, and we just know our general direction. Then, of course, it's framed search. But now comes the point. If you put up the TRL scale, TRL, technology readiness level, which is about how ready, I guess most of you know this, but it's about how ready a technology is. So at TRL 0, it's an ID, and then you mature things up here, and you get prototypes and testing and stuff. And up here, you're implementing things, right? So here we have the operational environment, and down here we have, searching, R&D, getting up ideas and developing things. Down here, you need framed leadership. Up here, you need alignment. And this is a very important part for people to understand, because sometimes the same person is up here, sometimes, and sometimes down here. And the leadership style needs to be different. So this is a really crucial thing to keep in mind when it comes to innovation, to get things going in a company. Now, how to generate. And these may be the most important slides that I have. So, which perspective to take? Do we bring up the magnifier? No. We are going to jump into the chapter. So let me try to explain what I mean by that. So first, I want to introduce two terms, justify out versus justify in. And I'm going to explain that with an example. So let's say that we here today, our sort of task is to save cost on this installation. So what we would typically do is that we would go in and analyze where the cost is. So we would analyze this thing. We would say, okay, here is the drilling tower. Okay, yes, well, that was expensive stuff. And then we would see, okay, the rises were also expensive, but not that expensive, and the process and living. And then we would analyze the whole thing. And then we would probably start to work with the most expensive one, drilling here. And we would go up to these drillers and we would say, it's really expensive, these things you have up here. We need to save some cost. And they would typically say, well, we have this old equipment that we have some long wells going, and we'd actually need new, stronger things. And there will be discussion, and maybe you save a little bit. But you have to argue things out of their model. This is called continuous improvement. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that. Some people call it lean as well. This is important to do, but it really gives incremental results. So what do we do? And particularly, I have to add, analyzing things. If you analyze, you chop up your solution into pieces, you don't question the totality. So what do we do with radical innovation? Well, we use justify in. We would keep this installation long enough for this thing here to understand what this is actually doing, the really fundamental service that it provides. What is an installation like this doing? Well, it's taking well content way down in the ground, up and into shore. That's its purpose. And then things happen. So we have to separate oil and gas and water, and then we need a big installation. But so the main purpose is not the restaurant, it's not the training center, it's not other things that you may have up there. Is really going to take whatever is down there up and into shore. So then after that, we would try to forget what we're doing. We would start with nothing. And we would ask, what do we need to accomplish that? And somebody would say, we need a hole in the ground. And somebody else would say, do we really need a hole in the ground? Yes, we need a hole in the ground. And then we draw up the hole, and then we expand from there. This is fundamentally different than what you would do over here. And I hope that you can see that what we do here can lead you to a totally different place than what this would do. This locks you a bit down. You may end up in the same place, but the probability is that you get somewhere else as well. So I will then come to the process of radical innovation. So we would typically, in the previous challenge, we would typically, previous slide, sorry, we would typically start with a very concrete challenge. We would pick up a huge installation in our portfolio, and we would start to work with that, being very concrete. We would not analyze, but we would start to work with the question, and we would go into the fundamentals. We would look at the fundamental need and no analysis. From here, we would imagine and stretch, and we would typically go further than we need to go. We can go extreme in many ways, but let's think about time. So if we need a solution, here is the timeline. If we need a solution here, we would typically go further and see, what would the future mean? How would this look in the future, the extreme long future? That has a tremendous effect on many things that I'm writing about. I don't have the time to go into the details here, but it has a tremendous effect on many things. Then, when we've discovered what this can mean, we would go back and go a little bit less extreme. When we know the future, we would then aim to what we really want to deliver. And then there is something called 10x upscaling. If we were really, very concrete here with one installation, we would try to upscale our cool ideas to the other installations, maybe the other fixed installations, and then the floaters, and then also land rigs. And as you upscale, you would get, modify things, and you would go towards something which is more fundamentally correct for every upscaling. Upscaling, this is a Google X term. They introduced that. And then in the end, you would look whether you can further improve things. And if you actually solve your challenge. And down here, you use justifying. This is really important for innovation. Then I'll very quickly, briefly mention how to implement, because this is important. And I know Eric loves this. So the boomerang effect of radical innovation. A practical example here. We are on the BMW. We're working for BMW here. We have an innovation scale here. We are going to make next model. So obviously, what we have now is 0 on innovation level. And here is the next model that they made. And I don't know if you can see the differences. It's some tiny here around the direction lights, and the hood is actually cut here, and it goes down here, and basically is very similar. This gentleman here, he's talking about mental anchors. A mental anchor is if you sell your used car, and you say, I want 10,000 euros for this car, that will be a mental anchor, because all you talk about later will be sort of relative to those 10,000 that you say you want. And here they have used justify out. They've had this car in focus. So what would we do if we use our radical techniques? Well, we would go and make a supercar using justify in. This supercar would have all sort of cool things. Maybe they wouldn't be available, possible even at the moment. But we would really stretch and open the solution space and inspire others. And then comes the thing. What could we do to move the mental anchor of these people here from the present solution up to the future one? Like, for example, going to these guys and say, well, we have this cool car, and we can't really make it work, but you guys, you really know cars. How would you guys make this car? I don't know what would have happened, but what I can say is that it would be more than taking this one and have a tiny dip on the hood and the direction light slightly different. We would take bigger steps. So my very point with this one, and for those especially interested, we would use justify out from the future model, meaning short step this one. We would stretch. And my point is we can use radical innovation and mental anchors to make our incremental engine take bigger steps. And then you would get value for your radical innovation long before it's ever made. This may not even be made at all. So this is a way to implement radical innovation and use that to change our mental anchors. So that's basically what I had. And then invented here. So basically, if you want to read more about this, I have put out available on Amazon a book called Radical Innovation Everybody Can If They Know How. It was a really short presentation this time. I would love to talk longer about these things, but if you want to know more, you can find it here.
Thank you very much, Steinar. And if any one of you has a question to Steinar, please type them in the chat box on the right-hand side. Steinar, in the meantime, I have a question to you. Yeah. And one of the most interesting parts I found of the book, and you also touched upon that in this presentation, was the requirement to have multiple disciplines involved to come up with radical concepts. Can you say a little bit about that, how you do that in Equinor? Do you leave it just up to the people in the research department, or do you also involve people from other parts of the business?
Thank you. That's a very good question. Well, we don't, in our groups, we have different groups around. So we started with a pilot that I mentioned, and then we have different groups around, and we pick very freely. In fact, it's not that many from the R&D department. We pick from anywhere. It can be financial people. It's certainly operational people. And when we pick people with a sort of I'm also putting that in the book, what kind of sort of qualities do we search for when to find people that would be efficient in this group? And that's a long list, but typically people with a very wide knowledge. They have an expertise, but they have a very wide knowledge around their expertise. And it's where these expertises sort of overlap with the other multi-skilled sort of expertises, you'll find gold. So this is a very different way of a normal standard R&D group that sort of, they're an expert on this thing, they hammer out stuff here. That's sort of the horse doctors, let's say, from the first metaphor. So that's a different way of doing things, and we get very different solutions. And this is actually very easy for people to start. You don't need a CEO sort of, thumbs up to borrow people 2.5 hours a week. Everybody has 2.5 hours a week. So just my recommendation is simply go and try. Yeah.
And Steinar, as a result of this, do you also see the link between research and the people in assets and projects to become do you see that link becoming stronger as a result?
So come again, please. I'm sorry. I was trying to think that was me. Yeah.
As people working in the assets and working on projects, as they become involved in the radical innovation work, do you see also the link between research and the business becoming stronger as a result?
Absolutely, definitely. What we see, and one thing is that we as a group get in that wide competence and all those different aspects for our solutions. But I also see that this is a strong culture builder in the sense that these people, they work most of their time elsewhere. So they bring in their challenges, we work with them, and then they bring back solutions. So it's really a way of building up a culture and also having all these aspects in. And I think one thing is the culture building. It's also a possibility to keep on the long headlights and what's that called? To look far and look close at the same time when you develop something. That's to me really crucial things about this way of doing.
Thanks, Steinar. And do you also see that the concepts you describe in the book can those also be applied to other industries? Or are they quite specific to energy? I know you gave some examples during this talk about cars and other things, but in general, can you apply the concepts to other industries as well?
Absolutely. I've been, one of the reasons for writing this book is that I've had very good feedback also from other industries. They're really keen on this because they learn what exactly to do to push themselves on a radical direction. And it works as well in any industry. This is really not an oil or energy type of industry only. It can be used everywhere. And I know because I'm speaking to people who are really interested in that.
Excellent. We have a question coming in.
Yeah.
Thanks, Steinar. Very interesting and inspiring presentation. When you color a group or team, how many participants do you usually have in the group? Any recommended size on the group for radical innovation?
Indeed. Thank you for that question. Excellent question. I personally believe that creativity is inversely proportional to the number of people. So we try not to be many, 5, 6, maximum 7. Really keep that low. If there are more people interested, make another group and make a network and cooperate and have some healthy competition rather than building the group bigger. I would say this is about having people to lower their shoulders, feel comfortable, psychological safety, starting to get familiar with other people so they can really open up and share things. So I would say not many. And if you start, we started with 2 people. And that was pretty efficient. 3 got a little bit better, but I mean, beyond that, the efficiency doesn't increase a whole lot. It's really keeping the numbers low, I would say.
Excellent. Another question coming in.
Yeah.
Steinar, brilliant presentation. When you identify a technology that can add value, how do you get the technology implemented in such a risk-adverse sector?
This is a really good question, and for us to call innovation, we need to implement things. And I'm writing a lot about this, and that the boomerang effect is one of them. We try to move mental anchors. We try to illustrate to people very clearly what the future can be. I would say the big corporates, they have a tendency to be very, how can I say, not clear on their strategies, in the sense that, I mean, they don't go far enough. They talk about we need to save money, or we need to go deeper or longer into this sector, but they're not really concrete. So that's what we can actually offer here. We offer how to do it concretely, which makes it far easier for people around to see and understand and put this into a context. And then you've moved mental anchors and you get stretch. But it's really, that's easy to say, and it's more complicated to do. So this is a really good question. That's sort of where where the challenge lies. How to sort of spread that.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Steinar, for this interesting talk and for addressing the questions. The recording of this webinar will be made available later this week and will be sent to all people that registered, and also will be made available via our LinkedIn channel. When we share the recording, we'll also share a link to a blog that I recently wrote, also explaining the link between the topic that Steinar presented and TechnologyCatalogue.com. So we'll share that with you. Thank you very much for attending and wish you all a great day.
Thank you. Thanks.